If you're watching this video on a laptop, smartphone, tablet, or television right now, you can thank the Industrial Revolution. How did this revolution impact our lives positively and negatively, and why was it needed? Today, in a 2023 world, we are living one of the most technologically advanced periods in time. But we didn't get there overnight. It took a couple of centuries to achieve that. The Industrial Revolution is what got us to where we are today. Without it, we wouldn't have the technology that we have in front of us right now. Of course, there's more to the story, as this revolution created benefits and created problems. Yet, it was greatly needed. In this week's episode, we are going to examine how the Industrial Revolution changed the world for the better and worse. And we'll also talk about why it was necessary. Before we start, if you enjoy learning about geography and earth science, please subscribe to my channel, Our World, Our Planet, Our Home. If you subscribe, leave a comment and I'll personally reply to it. Let's get started. Let's start with the historical background of the Industrial Revolution. The first part of the revolution began in Great Britain in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. At this time, Great Britain was going through its stage 2 transitional phase on the demographic transition, and once mass industrialization started, the nation entered stage 3, the industrializing phase. Some of the first industrializing features were steam power, which allowed for the powering of factories, mills, and trains and boats, mechanization, which connected to the steam power source, and machinery introductions into factories which enabled for faster assembly, hence mass assembly. Throughout the 19th century, the revolution spread to continental Europe and eventually to the United States. This spread to the US led to mass emigration from Europe, at first by Western Europeans such as Irish, Brits, Germans, Dutch, and Scandinavians, and later by Southern and Eastern Europeans such as Italians, Poles, Hungarians, Serbs, Croats, Czechs, and Jews. With this mass influx, the US population grew considerably and initiated the second phase of the Industrial Revolution, which introduced the world to electricity and communications. Thomas Edison, an American inventor, revolutionized some of the earlier electrical systems, including direct current, or DC power, which works by sending electric currents in a continuous flow. Edison's DC system was used in early electric, but was limited by how far-reaching it was, so it was only used locally. Later, Nikola Tesla, a Serbian inventor and electrical engineer, was hired by Edison to improve his DC electrical systems. However, Tesla revolutionized alternating current, or AC, which works by electric periodically reversing its direction. Edison, along with other investors associated with big business, were skeptical of Tesla's innovative system, and it wasn't adopted. But years later, Tesla kept improving alternating current systems, and ultimately it became widespread as a standardized power system used worldwide, since it's able to go over long distances. During the same time period, telecommunications began using electricity to transmit information. Inventions such as the telegraph, telephone, and radio transformed the way people communicate and receive information. Also, transportation options were changing, including with the introduction of the automobile and airplane. Carl Benz, a German engineer, is credited with creating and patenting the first internal combustion engine, a design which is still used by many cars today on the road. In the US, Henry Ford, the founder of Ford Motor Company, created the first mass car assembly line in 1913, which increased the supply of automobiles and slowly made them more affordable for the average consumer. Orville and Wilbur Wright, better known as the Wright brothers, achieved one of the first control-powered airplane flights at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina in 1903. Through the 20th century, both achieved great technological achievements. In the mid-20th century, another telecommunications breakthrough, the television, slowly entered households and became commonplace thereafter. By the 1970s, all of the mentioned inventions changed the year considerably, but one thing was about to happen: the third phase of the Industrial Revolution. In October 1969, the first practical networked communications via two separate computers were achieved by the U.S. Department of Defense. Through the 1970s and 1980s, this technology was improved and later known as what we call the Internet. In 1989, Tim Berners-Lee, a British computer scientist, created the World Wide Web, a system used to share and establish information. From that time on, this system started entering institutions, including businesses and educational establishments such as colleges and universities, and later homes. Through the 1990s, the World Wide Web increased its presence dramatically, and by the 21st century became an essential item needed. By this time as well, smartphone technology developed and led to further advancements of both the Internet and telecommunications. All of these inventions and innovations only took around 2 centuries to achieve. We all know that the Industrial Revolution has changed the world. But what are the positives and the negatives the revolution has done? Let's start with the bad. The first issue is associated with the use of fossil fuels, non-renewable polluting fuels. Coal, a cheap but heavily polluting fossil fuel, has been used since ancient times for purposes such as heating and cooling, but during the early phases of the Industrial Revolution, coal was heavily used to power steam engines in factories, on trains, and boats. Coal continued to be used in high amounts well into the 20th century, during this time for powering electricity plants. With this much use, coal has been a major contributing factor to an increase in greenhouse gases, along with oil used to power internal combustion engines. In 2023, fossil fuels are still widely used, even in developed nations, but more so in developing nations. India, for example, still uses three-fourths fossil fuels to power nearly 1.4 billion people. The further use of fossil fuels will further the increase in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, increasing the rate of gases such as carbon dioxide. Besides air pollution, the revolution significantly degraded water quality. In 1969, the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland was so heavily polluted that it caught on fire. The Gowanus Canal in Brooklyn was also severely degraded by pollutants. And water degradation issues persist in drinking water in many developing nations. Another negative of the Industrial Revolution was mass urbanization. When the revolution began in the UK in the late 18th century, many farmers migrated to cities in the nation and they became very overcrowded, which led to poor living conditions, which in turn spread more diseases, some of which were contagious. The same issue is currently plaguing many Stage 2 and Stage 3 nations around the world. An economic negative of the Industrial Revolution is that it created more class disparities. For example, when poor European immigrants came to the U.S. in the early 1900s, many of them would work long hours in factories with low pay and no benefits, while the owners of the factories would make a lot of money. This significantly changed when workplace regulations were put into effect by the federal government, along with the creation of OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which oversees and inspects workplaces for violations. But even today, there are still significant disparities between the ultra-wealthy and the rest, even more apparent in poorer nations. And finally, another negative of the revolution, especially nowadays, is social isolation. With the third phase of the revolution, which led to the creation of the internet, people started communicating within these networks rather than in person. Although more convenient, being more isolated can create sociological problems, more commonly seen with the younger generations who are frequent users of social media. Social media, something that became extremely popular in the 2000s, did connect friends and family, but also created problems such as cyberbullying, distorted realities, and privacy concerns. Now that we talked about the negatives of the Industrial Revolution, let's talk about the good it's done. Ironically, the positives are connected to the negatives, as you'll see. First, the Industrial Revolution has excelled technology. In 1823, 200 years ago, there weren't any telephones, radios, televisions, automobiles, or airplanes. Today, we have all that and more. And interestingly enough, some of those things we didn't have 200 years ago are outdated, like landline telephones and basic radios. This shows how far we've truly come. A second positive of the revolution was urbanization, which was also a negative. Initially, urbanization caused many societal issues such as class disparities, a lack of hygienic standards, and disease. But in many urban areas around the world, even in large cities and Stage 2 nations, the standard of living is high. For example, in Russia, the Moscow area has a Human Development Index of 0.940, comparable to that of Western European nations. But Tuva, a rural republic bordering Mongolia, has a Human Development Index only 0.787, significantly lower. Urbanization and industrialization together have led to a higher standard of living overall. A third positive of the revolution has been advancements in healthcare. At around the same time the Industrial Revolution began, so did the progress in medicine. In the late 1700s, Edward Jenner, an English doctor, created the smallpox vaccine. Smallpox, especially the variola major form of the virus, had a very high fatality rate of 20 to 40%. Once the smallpox vaccine was widely available, illnesses and deaths from it dramatically decreased. Throughout the 19th and 20th century, many other advancements in medical care were made, increasing life expectancies and overall quality of life. Next, another positive of the revolution was better connectivity in terms of communication. The telegraph initially, and later the telephone, radio, and television, allowed people to receive information quicker than ever. Nowadays, fiber optic internet connections give us information in a matter of seconds. And lastly, a final positive of the Industrial Revolution was an increase in educational opportunities. Before industrialization, most people did not attend formal schooling, as only wealthy people did. This limited education. But gradually, more and more people did attend schooling and become educated. A more educated population also correlated directly with a better standard of living. The question now is, was the Industrial Revolution needed? The simple answer to that is yes, it was needed. Despite all the negative impacts from it, the Industrial Revolution progressed humanity unlike anything else. In that time, it improved people's lives in terms of economics, health, education, and more. Calvin Coolidge Jr., the son of President Calvin Coolidge, developed a blister on one of his toes while playing tennis on June 30th, 1924. The blister became infected, and a little more than a week later, he died of sepsis at the age of 16 years old. Keep in mind that this was 99 years ago, and he was also the president's son. Today, a blister rarely kills anyone, as there are antibiotics to treat infections. Another thing the Industrial Revolution has done is shrink the world by globalization. Although physically the world is the same size, it feels smaller because we can connect with people within seconds, thousands of miles away, especially through the internet. And if someone wants to travel from New York City to London, they could just take a nonstop flight on an airplane and be there in around 7 to 8 hours. 250 years ago, before steamships, that voyage on a sail ship might have taken weeks or months. There is real concern about what impact the Industrial Revolution has had on issues such as climate change. We all know that pollution did increase significantly from the revolution. However, in the 21st century, pollution levels are way lower thanks to increased technology implemented into fossil fuel power plants and vehicles. The 21st century has also seen a revolution in renewable energy, especially solar and wind power, along with the increase of electric vehicles. Right now, there are still many limitations to renewable energy in electric cars. With electric vehicles, limitations include limited ranges, an inadequate charging infrastructure, and cold weather issues with batteries holding their charge. Like anything, though, in the next few decades, we will likely see improvements in clean energy, possibly leading to another phase of the Industrial Revolution. What is your opinion on the Industrial Revolution? Did it help or hurt the world? I review both sides of the argument, but I value everyone's opinion. So please leave a comment and let me know what you think about it. Thanks again for watching this week's episode. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, Our World, Our Planet, Our Home, if you enjoy learning about geography and earth science. Until next time!